Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about The Favorite. When you get into kind of the classical kind of period piece genre, and particularly when we're talking about like long ago in England kind of stuff, it's not exactly something that I'm totally into because oftentimes it can be way more about like what's underneath and all that stuff, and that can be interesting, but it's not dynamically shot, it's not as interesting necessarily, and The Favorite doesn't do that like at all. The Favorite is going into the power struggles. It's funny, it's weird, it's, you know, directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, so of course it's not going to be your normal kind of thing. And in some ways his intersection with the genre is sort of interesting because, I mean, this was a screenplay that had been around for a long time by Deborah Davis since the 90s apparently. I'm not sure what Tony McNamara's deal is though with this. Was he with it the whole time? I don't know. But his intersection with this is interesting because you get all the weird strangeness that you are used to from him, that I've been used to, that we've all been used to from the films. I've only seen Dogtooth, The Lobster, and this. I did not see Killing of a Sacred Deer, unfortunately, or the second one, which nobody talks about. He keeps all his strangeness and weirdness, but also intersects with this kind of way where he feels like the most mainstream I've ever seen him. You know, for him, not for like mainstream stuff. The Favorite plays both as a comic tale, more probably comic than I've seen from him before, but also a sad tale of captivity and kind of social status captivity, similar to what you saw in Dogtooth and The Lobster actually, by kind of your status, your time, your social standings, your economic standings, and how each of those is kind of a trapping unto itself. And The Favorite plays within that, where you have Queen Anne, who is the Queen of England at the time in the 18th century. This is like early 18th century. This is like, there's no America then, or there was, whatever. Anyway, you have Queen Anne, who's played by Olivia Colman, who has had a close relationship, and maybe a little more, with Sarah Churchill, played by Rachel Weisz, and that's going great. And Sarah Churchill is basically running England pretty much. She likes doing it. She likes running the country. She's doing it for basically the power of being able to run things. And then Emma Stone, who has been sent there to look for a job and who used to be wealthy but then has fallen on hard times, is trying to work her way back up, worming her way into the friendship and maybe more with the Queen, and kind of rising herself up through that and kind of taking Rachel Weisz down, thus the title The Favorite. Now I think their reasons for being the favorite kind of can open up all sorts of kind of theoretical or moral conundrums, whereas Rachel Weisz is doing it probably for the good of England, you know, depending on your perspective, is kind of doing it more for what she feels is right for her country. She's being, I guess you could consider, more noble. Now, I don't know enough politically to say like which one. This isn't a period of history that I'm totally familiar with, and actually like people in England aren't totally familiar with either. They had to do a lot of research to get as much information as they could. Not that they need to be completely like exactly correct on all this stuff, but they definitely did do a lot of research. Even like apparently part of it, Sarah Churchill, who's related to Winston Churchill, actually helped do some research, not that he was still alive, but like letters and research he found and wrote based on his family history, which is kind of interesting, that Winston Churchill was the source for this movie. Coming back every Oscar season, Winston Churchill. It gets into this whole idea that, you know, you had Sarah Churchill, who was running the country, doing what considered to be a good job, trying to do the best thing for the country. And then you have Emma Stone's character, Abigail, who basically just wants to be there so she can have money again and she can be rich and she can be set up and financially fine. She doesn't have to have, you know, kind of a beggar's job, sleeping in a room filled with people, cleaning the floors when she gets kind of poisoned by lye because they don't tell her that's in the water, all sorts of awful things. So she doesn't want any part of that. Now, you understand where Emma Stone's coming from because, you know, that sucks. But at the same time, you understand that what she's basically doing is basically kind of more self-centered and selfish. Now you could also say that what Rachel Weisz is doing is self-centered and selfish because she likes the power and what she can do with that position, and understanding that Olivia Colman's Anne can't really do that very well, so she needs someone to do it for her. This is all kind of the things that are going on behind the scenes. I don't think, you know, my whole going on about it is not really what the movie's about. It's actually really funny, which Yorgos Lanthimos is very good at. Between Emma Stone and Rachel Weisz, and one of the best actresses of her generation, Olivia Colman, you have three actresses who are always pretty decent. I've always liked all three of them. They're all going toe-to-toe with one another in kind of a comic foil kind of a way, more in this kind of like lesbian undercurrent thing going throughout it. In some ways, it kind of gets to like, well, who is even better for Olivia Colman's character, because Rachel Weisz's character of Sarah Churchill will say not necessarily the nicest things, but she'll say the things that she needs to hear, whereas Abigail makes her feel good. Like, I'm not gonna get to the various things she says of why Abigail makes her feel good, but which is like what springs to mind because it was like quite funny how she puts it. Not because I'm gross, but maybe a little because I'm gross. It kind of gets into like, well, what's better for you? The thing that is tougher and harder, or the thing that is easier and the thing that maybe you enjoy more? And I think it gets into that. You could have this relate to what's going on politically now. Even the presidential election can relate to this film, and I could see that in this film. I could see Rachel Weisz being more of the Hillary Clinton and then Emma Stone's character being more of the Trump, but it's not explicitly saying that. I've noticed there's a lot of times in modern film where instead of going politically, like what I've often complained about the George W. Bush kind of era of commenting on things to be very direct, and none of that really lives on and is very good. This is more indirect in that in 20, 30 years, you could look at this and go, oh, actually, this is about this political climate now, it relates to this. It's very universal in what it's doing, but it's specific, maybe morally, not specific in terms of what it's trying to say about each person. It's not specific about what it's trying to say about this era necessarily, although you can definitely read into that. But I found this film to be more comic and kind of savage and dark, which is, I guess, Yorgos Lanthimos' kind of trademark to do such things. I mean, it had this kind of interesting kind of weird surreal thing. He had the camera that this was shot by Robbie Ryan, who's shot for Andrea Arnold, Fish Tank, a film I really love, and her follow-up Wuthering Heights. And Robbie Ryan's worked really well actually with this genre, with the period stuff and doing like different cinematography. He's really good at like not falling into the kind of trappings of just like, hey, it's a beautiful vista. Like if you saw his Wuthering Heights, like that was like totally doing its own different weird thing, and even in 4-3 I believe, and I really like that about that movie. And he does that again here, but he in a totally different way. They're not comparable other than they're the same dude who shot both. But in this he uses this weird lens where you can see kind of like a globe kind of curvature kind of thing. It's not a fisheye, but it's kind of like in the ballpark. It's like a few degrees away from fisheye. It is not a fisheye lens. It's not like a Hype Williams video in 1998 or something, but it kind of emphasizes that in a way. I think in some ways this film could just be weirder if it hadn't done all those things, but I think because you're not getting into the truly strangeness that Lanthimos is used to, it's like that strangeness needed to go somewhere. Like he couldn't just shoot this thing like a normal kind of a period piece. And I think that's something that I really loved about this movie, specifically how it was shot. I thought that is something that really kind of gave this film some interesting energy about it. I think Lanthimos, this kind of shows he could break out from his own kind of auteurist kind of trademark. In a lot of ways, I'm sad about that. I like his strange kind of weirdness and dark kind of sensibilities, but in other ways, I kind of like that he was able to do something different with this. I don't know if I maybe love this film as much as some people do, but I often, when I was watching it, kind of liked so many of the parts of it. I think I would love to watch it again, to be honest. And there's so many things from like all the different great performances between Emma Stone's character. You are with her and you're following her, but you also can see that she's like kind of maybe like destroying things at the same time, although Rachel Weisz you might not necessarily like, but sometimes you do. Olivia Colman, who is often like really very funny, but also you kind of pretty much feel bad for. I don't know if this is the performance of hers that I like the most. I don't think it is at all. I like how she played with the sadness, but also like, you'd often want to laugh with her. It felt like she wanted to laugh a lot of the times. Almost everyone played it in more of a modern kind of sense, and I think, I read that a lot, like Olivia Colman didn't really do a lot of research. She just did what was on the page, and you can tell that seems to be what they did, which I actually think, might not sound like the most intelligent, research way, just kind of a movie, but I think actually works for it, because if this film had been so stodged down by like, oh, did you read like chapter 27 of the biography and this is what happens and blah blah blah, I don't think this would work as well. They're playing them more as characters and less as historical kind of major figures or something like that, which I think like definitely frees this film. We have so many of these like every Oscar season, and it's kind of interesting one that takes obscure history that no one's like, I don't really know this, and they're like, well, we didn't know it either, we kind of just had a lot of fun, and that's kind of something that plays it within it really well. Nicholas Hoult, who, by the way, like a friend of mine, and if you're watching this, I apologize, you can put in the comments it was me, and if it's not you, I'll know, so don't be all smart about it. That this is an interesting reunion of About a Boy from Nicholas Hoult and Rachel Weisz, which is funny. I like About a Boy a lot. I don't know if they've been in other movies together before this, but it's interesting that it's this one. Nicholas Hoult, there's sometimes he just like, he was like with the pipe and like doing this stance like out of like an 18th century painting or something. I was like, wow, he like studied some art of the time. He was just so delicious in this. I like him a lot as a character actor. I know he's very handsome and so forth, but him as a character actor is so good. Like between this and like Mad Max, and he always plays like really interesting performances. I never want him to be a lead. You'll ruin him. Please don't do that. Please just stay a supporting actor. I don't even like him being in those X-Men movies. Just like I do actually like him in those X-Men movies, but like he was so good in this. I'm sort of disappointed he's not getting more acclaim, but I sort of understand because the powerhouse trifecta of the three women in this film are just so powerful. It's like that's who you want to follow, that's who you remember. You often forget about Nicholas Hoult because most of what you remember, what people are talking about, are Emma Stone, Olivia Colman, and Rachel Weisz. This film was amazingly well cast. You know, having like Rachel Weisz, who has, you know, very like authentic kind of like thick, more like posh kind of accent, versus Emma Stone, who, you know, doesn't, to put it nicely. But I thought her accent was fine. This is kind of like a very strange way to go about a period film. I often just find it like lovely how wonderful it is. When I was watching the film, I would just get so into the drama. We were seeing this at a Nighthawk, which is like Draft House kind of theater, and they bring the check out at a certain point. And when they did, like, they were having a confrontation, and I waited to like put the card in because I was like wanted to see what happened first. I was like so drawn in by it. Like, this film really gets you into its weird, strange, captive kind of world. And the sadness when you understand why Olivia Colman's character is so crazy, because she's had like lost like 17 children, and she's gone through all this tragedy, and she doesn't have an heir, and like all these pressures within her, and you're like, yeah, I think I might be a little weird too. Also, they didn't have TV, so like, what, they look at the walls all the time? I think this has such a strange energy in it, but when you look at those times, you're like, that just feels so weird and odd to me. It seems like Yorgos Lanthimos got way more into that, while also making it oddly sort of relatable on a lot of levels, while also upping the kind of strange, older, kind of opaque factor of the whole thing. Favorite's just such an interesting, odd, kind of original film. I think that's one of the things about it. It's like, it's nothing like what he's done before. In some ways, I mean that in like more of a mainstream sense, but in other ways, I find it kind of interesting. I'm curious where this kind of tourist thread will go. You know, if this is just kind of like, hey, remember when he did that thing that one time, or if this is like an opening up of more kind of possibilities. I like his dark sense, and I think it goes into history because history's kind of weird, and these people are kind of fucking weird, and it kind of goes into like, you have all these strange, weird, insane people playing weird games on each other that are, you know, kind of deciding the fate of that entire country at the time. It feels as strange as it actually was, you know, that was really going on, and it still feels a little strange, to be honest. The Favorite is kind of a uniquely bizarre, darkly strange kind of a film, and the kind of weird relationship take on the idea of power, the idea of what you want from power, and why you need that power, but also the drive for it in a very strange, bizarrely sad situation. The Favorite doesn't let go of any of that context, while also not letting it all hamper it down. This film, from any other filmmaker, would be depressing and sad, and maybe not as interesting as it is. But Yorgos Lanthimos does so much in it, and still leaves, like Olivia Colman, in my mind, even though she's a very great actress, is more known to me as a comedic actress. And I think because you have that at the center of it, you're able to make this film a lot more fun than it has really any right to be. And that's one of the things that makes The Favorite so special, is because you have, at the center of it, you have Olivia Colman, you have Rachel Weisz, you have Emma Stone, who've done comedic performances, but they also know like where to play all these things. And I think this film like kind of plays it all over, that you're not really sure where you're going in a lot of places, and sometimes you're not sure whether you should laugh or cry or feel bad for them. And it is kind of more of an interesting film than maybe it should be. It feels like they were loose on it, but it also feels like there's a lot of detail, and that's a strange kind of flow for any kind of film to have. But The Favorite manages to weave it all kind of quite well into the kind of delicious package that it is. So if you've seen The Favorite and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.